Hello, it's time for another episode of Backyard Science. To tie into our chapter on rocks and minerals, we're going to look at crystalline structures. As you know, minerals have crystal structures, and we're going to grow some crystals with common household ingredients for the most part, and just see how those grow over the next few days. We're going to start out with borax. It's a pretty easy one to grow. You may or may not have borax around the house, but it is found on the laundry aisle of your grocery store, so it's not too difficult to find. We're going to start off with a cup of hot water, and I'm going to add approximately 3 tablespoons of borax. You can see it's a fine white powder as I just spilled it all over the table. Borax also kills ants, so if you want a natural ant deterrent, you can make a little mixture of borax. I'm going to have my lab assistant mix that up while I just brush this off. So we'll get rid of the ants in this area of the yard. And we just want that to dissolve. So while she stirs that up to get it to dissolve in the hot water, ideally you don't want any settled on the bottom. It means not all of it is dissolved in the solvent. So it's over, you've added too much. We want it saturated so that we've got as much dissolved as possible. Keep stirring. How we're going to grow our crystals, we're just going to put the water borax solution in a jar, and I have made a snowflake out of a pipe cleaner, and it's just hanging from a string so I can suspend it in the solution once it's all mixed up. Add some to our jar, and we'll just suspend that. I don't know if we have enough. There it goes. So let me see if I can make the string a little longer. Ideally, yeah, it's not touching the bottom. So that should be all set. We'll just keep an eye on that for a few days and see what happens. All right, for our second crystal we're going to grow, this is a new one for me to try. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to use alum that you find in the spice aisle of your grocery store. Probably, again, not something you necessarily keep in your kitchen cabinet to cook with. It's used for canning, but it is just a common household ingredient. So for this one, we are going to measure out half a cup of hot water. And I'm just going to add that to my bowl so I don't have to keep washing my measuring cup here. And we want 2.5 tablespoons of alum. I've got a container open here. You can see that it's a white powder. It's already kind of large chunks. Let's see if we can get a tablespoon measured out here. That was almost a tablespoon. Go ahead and grab a plastic spoon and you can start mixing this up. So that was a little over a tablespoon. That'll make up for the smaller one. Looks almost kind of like a rock salt or something. Keep stirring real good. Alright, I'm going to let her continue to stir while I do the next one. So I'm going to put you over here. You stir. So for this next one, I want a cup hot water. Be ideal if it's boiling. This started out as boiling. I don't think it's boiling anymore. So I have a cup of water. And then I want 1/4 cup of salt. I'll need 2 of these for 1/4 cup. There's 1 ounce of salt. 2 ounces of salt. And I'm going to put in a couple of tablespoons of just plain vinegar. Now I'll mix this up and try to dissolve that salt in the hot water. Okay, so I've been stirring for a little while now, and the salt is pretty much dissolved in the hot water and vinegar. So for this one, I haven't done this experiment quite like this before, so we're going to give it a try. I have a sponge here, and I'm just going to put a dot or two of food coloring in different places. So there's green, blue, red, there's yellow. It may not show up on the yellow sponge very well. I guess it does, kind of as orange. And then we're going to pour this salt solution over the sponge until it's saturated. And again, then we'll watch and see what happens. So that's pretty much what we'll do with that. Okay, I'm going to pour a little bit in the bottom of the dish, and just so that sponge can soak it up. Alright, another thing we're going to do with the salt and vinegar, so I'm going to empty this out. Now I just want a little bit of vinegar and a little bit of salt to do one more little experiment. I'm not going to measure it out. See if I can get this stirred up. I may have put too much salt in. So I'm about to get the salt dissolved. And what we're going to do is I have a couple little containers here. One has a fairly new penny, 2018 or so, I think. You want to read the year on that one? I think my son said it was about 1977. She agrees. So it's old. And we're just going to put a little bit of this vinegar salt solution on each one and let them set for a little while. Oops, I may have too much. I might have to empty a little bit of that out. But we'll see what happens. So we'll be watching those as well. I'm going to kind of set those to the side. Now we're going to revisit the alum that was dissolved in hot water. After Molly stirred it for quite a while, you can see that it pretty much dissolved. So now we're just going to watch that and see what happens with that also. So I'm going to set that to the side and see what crystals we have left. Okay. This next one is one I have not done before. Again, it's another household type item. May not be something you keep around a lot, but Epsom salts. A lot of people use them for a foot soak now and then. We are going to use a half a cup of hot water. So I still have about a cup left. So I'm going to empty some of this out, I guess. Alright, so that should be about half a cup. And then I want a quarter of a cup of the Epsom salts. So there's 1 ounce. And there's about another ounce. And I'll get my lab assistant to stir and dissolve the Epsom salts in the warm water. Alright, while she stirs, I want to get my last one here. This you probably don't have laying around your house. This is a rock called dolomite. Ordered this from a science company. It's a special kind of rock that has some minerals in it that will dissolve when they're in an acid. So I'm going to just put it in here, try to turn it some way so it'll be fairly stable. And we're just going to put vinegar until just the tip of the rock is exposed. I think that'll work well. If you look closely, you can tell there's just a point of the rock exposed at the top. And we're actually just going to let that set. Now, I washed it off, but it looks like it's still a little dirty. It is a rock. But we will watch that over the next few days and see what that does as well. So, for our Epsom salts, I've got these two. I think she's about to get them dissolved. Alright, so they're mostly dissolved. Probably what little bit hasn't dissolved will stay in the bottom of the cup. Now for this, I saw a couple different ways to do it, so we're going to try both. I'm going to saturate a sponge, let it sit in just a little bit, and then I'm just going to put a little bit in a shallow bowl. And we'll see what happens with those. If you look closely, you can tell there's really nothing in there. I left what little bit didn't dissolve in the bottom of the measuring cup. So we're going to let our crystals sit. I'm going to move them to a corner of my dining room, and that's where we'll observe them. And that wraps up the beginning of this experiment for Backyard Science.